I'm so sorry.
Sorry, Al? Why? You were just doing your job, right? And I bet you would have won. I forgive you.
Now, I believe we just witnessed one of the most diabolical episodes of The Boys as Homelander strips away any remains of him seeking love from others as he takes a trip back home. Meanwhile, the master plan works to take down America's sweetheart as Butcher may or may not have mysterious powers, as it is time for us to break down this 4th episode of The Boys. Spoilers ahead. We open with where Homelander started as we see drawings of his original suit and various confidential emails from Vought on a bulletin board. As the security systems are down, the staff believes they have been breached as the elevator doors open and it's Homelander with a cake in his hands. Now Marty is the first to say hello as he's corrected after calling Homelander John. As Homelander puts on his happy face and pretends to be in a good mood as he says hello to the new and old faces and tells them to have some cake as he instructs them to call in one of the older members by the name of Barbara to celebrate this reunion. Now it's pretty clear that everyone in this room is clearly uncomfortable with Homelander being there, and it makes sense because they're probably fearful of their lives being taken away by the thing that they created. But I am curious to know, what exactly is the staff still doing in this department? Have they been testing to create another Homelander without his knowledge? Now at this point we're going to separate the rest of the breakdown by individual plots, starting with Frenchie and Colin. Now I don't know what Frenchie's angle ever was with getting back with Colin, but he asks Colin why he never talks about his family. Well, I'm thinking to myself, well, you know why, you idiot, because his family's dead. What else do you need to know? And you know this as well, but Colin tells him exactly what happened. Now we learned that Colin's mom was a federal judge and she was prepared to make an example out of Frenchie's boss, but she ordered the hit on them, and we also find out that Colin was actually in the house when that hit went down, but he was just hiding under his bed as his entire family was being murdered. Now the only thing that Colin saw was the ankles of the killers, and we find out that that was obviously Frenchie. Now I mentioned it in my breakdowns of episodes 1 and 3, but the Colin and the Frenchie plot is the weakest story of the season so far. To me, whenever we cut to them, it just comes off weightless. Like, we just met Colin and I have no emotional connection to him or his family. And whenever he talks about his family, especially in this scene, it just comes off lifeless. Now, we'll tie this story up towards the end, but let's switch over and talk about what's going on with Huey in this episode. He learns that his dad is just a mere days of passing away as they're labeling him as being brain dead soon, and they want to remove his feeding tube. Now Huey doesn't want this to happen, but his mom doesn't stop this because she believes she wants the suffering to end for Huey's father as we watch Huey walk away. Now to the surprise of Kimiko, Huey sets up a secret meeting between him and A-Train, who was expecting MM, as Huey wants a dose of Compound V to save his father's life. Now while this meeting was going on, we see in the background that someone's taking pictures of this meeting, and we find out who that is in a little bit, but I'm not sure how they were able to track Kimiko. Did I miss something? Did they tag her in the fight that they got in the warehouse last week? That question was never answered in this episode. Now, A-Train tells Huey that the V is hidden away in Homelander's penthouse and basically impossible to get without him noticing, but Huey doesn't take no for an answer and tells him that he owes him in doing this after killing his girlfriend. Now A-Train agrees to help Huey, and he tells him that if he helps, they'll be squared away. And listen, I get the angle that we're getting with Huey, that he's desperate, that he's willing to do anything to save his father's life, and I also get that we're on this A-Train redemption arc, but I need a little bit more legwork for A-Train to now all of a sudden be willing to risk his own life with Homelander catching him taking a V in doing this to make up with Huey. That to me is a bit of a stretch. Now meanwhile, we have some shots being fired at Kimiko and Huey, and we find out that it's the same people that was spying on them, as it's the girl that we met at the warehouse who's also a part of the Shining Light group. Now during this scuffle, we see Huey gets injured, and we see Kimiko has to patch up his injured ankle as she tells him he has to prepare to fight for his life. Now we see Kimiko manages to take out a couple of the guys with ease until the mystery woman shoots Kimiko and actually splits her in half, leaving Huey to fend for himself. Now when this happened, I thought to myself, oh, Huey is going to really have to figure out a way to survive, because I thought it was going to take forever for Kimiko to heal, but as we'll find out later, it takes just a couple of seconds. Now Huey goes toe to toe with one of the guys, and in a panicked state of mind, he manages to hold his own. Now he does get some cuts and bruises, but he ultimately kills this guy by cutting out his insides and also cutting in his throat. Now, I've said it before, I am not a Huey fan, but I gotta call it like I see it, and I'm gonna give him his props. This scene was pretty badass. Now, meanwhile, like I mentioned, I was wrong. Kimiko was able to heal pretty quickly as she fights this mysterious girl. Now, Kimiko takes this girl down and holds out her hand as the girl doesn't want to take it, and she tells her that she doesn't remember. As we learn that when she was working for the Shining Light, Kimiko tricked this girl into getting kidnapped, and they made her fight in this camp. Now, this is yet another example of one of our main characters having to face their past and them being affected by their past. You can look at Frenchie, Huey, Homelander, Starlight, and now Kimiko's main past is being revealed. Now, yet again, we see our heroes allow the villains to live as Kimiko and Huey walk away from the situation. Now, as it pertains to this plot, I can see it going a couple different ways. Number one, this mysterious woman will either continue to try to kill Kimiko, and I can see Frenchie being involved in the plot and Colin being involved, and Kimiko has to choose who's going to live, who's going to die. Or we're going to see Kimiko and this mysterious girl work together to take down the Shining Light group, and that can happen either this season to kind of end that arc, or they can carry it over to the last season. Now, I mentioned A-Train earlier, so let's talk about what he's got going on in this episode. So he decides to finally go to Homelander's penthouse where he finds his secret stash of milk, but he also finds the V. Now, he gets caught by Ashley, who he discovers left a surprise in Homelander's toilet. Now, they both appear to have a problem, but they realize they share a dislike in Homelander, and I think it's pretty safe to say that we're going to probably see Ashley and A-Train working together for the rest of this season. Now, before continuing, I will point out that we got yet another Gen V reference in this episode, as we see a commercial playing for the latest episode of The Whole Truth by Tech Knight, who's discussing the disappearance of the real heroes of the Godolkin Massacre. To me, it's just a matter of time before we get to see what was revealed in the marketing in the trailer of this season, which showed Kate and Sam will appear in this season of The Boys, and I have an idea how they're going to be used a little bit later in this video. Now, Singer watches the news as they talk about the anti-hero law and how Vought is clearly against this, as Annie pays him a visit to address the new bill and possibly help with the marketing campaign to make sure it's passed, as she'll be in full Starlight form. Now, in return, he promises that he'll finally put Vought into the ground, which is a perfect segue into Sage's main plans for Starlight. Now, Sage goes over the next steps with the Vought marketing team and the members of the Seven to begin this smear campaign on Starlight. Now, they plan on coming at her with a ton of damaging things that we see later in this episode, but we see that the Deep is head over heels for Sage, and he wants to take her out on lunch, but she plays the I hate you card in front of the others, at least for now. Now, Sage presents Firecracker with her final plans for Starlight, as Firecracker calls her one of the good ones, meaning that she's not like most black people, as Sage gives her a look and she walks away. Now, again, I definitely think she's secretly working on something to take down the Seven, but I could be wrong, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, we cut to the first episode with a live audience of the Truth Bomb with Firecracker, with special guests Kanye West and Starlight's old pastor, Ezekiel. Now, Annie clears out her headquarters to avoid the inevitable danger that's going to probably come from across the street as the boys arrive, and MM lets Annie know that he's brought Butcher back into the fold, and Annie is clearly pissed. I'm sorry, I gotta bring this up, but when did Butcher and MM essentially make up for MM to feel comfortable for Butcher getting back in the group? Now, I think we all knew inevitably Butcher was going to join, but I would have loved to have seen the scene or the moment where MM's like, you know what, it is what it is, come back, but we don't see that. Is it me, or did that bother you all? As I digress, we see Annie lies about knowing why Firecracker hates her, most likely because she's embarrassed about that story, as Butcher and MM plan to take down Firecracker at her show. Now, at Firecracker's show, we get a duet between her and the Deep. Meanwhile, MM and Butcher sneak their way backstage. Now, Butcher wants MM to save Ryan if he doesn't make it, and he wants him to raise him like he's his own, but we don't get an answer from MM in this scene, but I'm pretty confident that this scene may come back into play somewhere down the road. Now, MM and Butcher confront Firecracker as they tell her that they know about her secret sexual relationship with a 15-year-old when she was 28, as they have a drafted up tweet to expose her. Now, for all those people that were head over heels of Firecracker after the first 3 episodes, I got a question for y'all. How do you feel about her now? Do you still want to fix her? But as they tell her that they want to know everything about Sage's plan, or else they're going to tweet about her past, and as a surprise to me, as well as these characters, she hits the tweet button on her her own as she tells them,
Send it myself. Fuck around and find out.
Now, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident that Firecracker knew that this was going to be exposed about her, because we know that she's working with Sage, who we know is the smartest person in the world, and this could be another example of her being 10 steps ahead of the boys. And also, they just know that her fans are idiots and they're going to believe anything she says, as we're about to find out in the next scene. Now, back on stage with Ezekiel, he does some extraordinary math to make it seem as though the letters in Starlight's name equal the number of Satan, as Firecracker returns and she confesses her sins about the situation, and that after that happened, she turned her life around. As she continues to go on, she eventually tells a story about Starlight's first save at 13 years old, as she accidentally blinded a mother of 3. Now, she tells the rest of the crowd and everyone watching on TV that Starlight was never a hero, and we see that Starlight's friend and Colin give her this look of shame. Now, this could be me, but the look that Colin and her friend gave her when they found out what happened when she was 13 was just ridiculous. Like, this look of shame is so stupid to me, because they didn't even blink an eye when they heard about Firecracker and that situation that she was in years ago, which was way worse in my opinion than what happened with Starlight. So let me know if y'all felt the same thing in the comment section. But as we move on, we see later in the episode, Frenchie is given the keys to Firecracker's trailer, and as he heads inside, he finds the tablet Sage gave her that showed the master plan to take down Starlight. Meanwhile, Firecracker reveals the final stage, which is 6 months ago, Starlight was pregnant and she ended up deciding to get an abortion. Now, this is clearly the final straw for Annie, as Firecracker tells her audience,
Tell me that those teens over there, that they're safe with her, with that baby killer?
As we see Starlight makes her way across the street, and she has no words for Firecracker, but instead she just starts beating her ass. While that's happening, we see Frenchie get caught by Ezekiel, and he gets beat up until Butcher steps in, and we see him freezes his arm and breaks it. Now, back on stage, we see Starlight continues to beat up on Firecracker as Sage watches this, and I kind of got a feeling that she was enjoying what was happening, both with Firecracker getting beat up for what she said earlier, but also not being a fan of Starlight. As stops Annie as she realizes this beating was captured on television and will most likely destroy her image, as Sage says,
First pebble down the mountain.
Now, back with Billy, he's almost about to die as Becca tells him to get up, but he can't, and out of nowhere, Ezekiel explodes without explanation. Now, something tells me that that little parasite inside of Butcher may have saved him in this exact moment, and it might be mutating inside of him. Now, after Colin tries to help Frenchie after getting beat up, he finally reveals what he did, and he tells him that he killed his family. As we watch Colin start to beat him up, punch him in the face, he's choking him, he's about to kill him, but he eventually stops, and he tells Frenchie to never talk to him again. Which I'm okay with, because I'm so tired of this storyline, but I'm pretty confident that that's not the last time we'll see Colin this season. Now, to spotlight the most evil and diabolical storyline of this episode, let's talk about Homelander's reunion. Now, Homelander challenges Frank to a game of waste paper basketball, and if he wins, he'll allow him to go home early. Simple enough. As Homelander explains the time he saw Frank playing this game, as he turned up the temperature on this human-made oven to try to burn Kid Homelander's skin off, as if this was just something normal on a regular day. As Homelander details, even though the oven didn't work, he was still in pain as he cried during those moments. Now, Frank tells him he was just doing his job, as Homelander tells him that it was something that he never forgot. As he instructs Frank to get into this oven as he takes his last shot, and if he refuses to go in, he's going to bring his family and have him join him in this oven, as we watch Frank enters and he begins to apologize. Now, Homelander reminds him he was just doing his job, as he cuts on the machine and Frank burns alive, and all is forgiven. At this point in this episode, it was pretty clear that Homelander was trying to eradicate all the remains of his humanity. Now, if you thought that was bad, let's talk about what happens next. Now, Homelander calls over Marty to apologize for Frank, and he accepts his apology. Now, Marty reminds Homelander that, yeah, he was the good guy. He was the one that was nice to Homelander when he was a kid, until Homelander reminds him of the nickname he gave him after he caught young Homelander, or young John, pleasuring himself, which really hurt Homelander's feelings. Now, Marty apologizes, but Homelander wants to get a laugh out of him, and he wants him to pleasure himself in front of everyone in the room. Now, in perfect boys fashion, he proceeds to do the deed, and Homelander sits there and watches him and begins laughing. Now, of course, Marty isn't able to get himself excited, so Homelander tells him that if he doesn't get excited, he's going to laser his private part off. Okay, to me, and let me know how you feel about this in the comments, this was easily one of the most ridiculously disturbing scenes of the show so far, as Marty can't do it, and Homelander goes ahead and does what he promises and lasers him. The laugh that Anthony Starr does as Homelander in this scene is stuff made out of nightmares and scary as hell, as Barbara finally arrives. Now, Barbara wants Homelander Homelander to show him some mercy as she wants him to take him out of his misery as we watch Homelander smushes his head with his boot. Now inside the room that Homelander will call the bad room, he talks to Barbara. She reminds Homelander that they were just following orders from the higher-ups, whether it was her, Stan, or Dr. Venderbom, as Homelander points out that none of them stopped what happened. As we hear about the day that Homelander was born, as he lasered his way out of his mother's stomach, killing her and floating in the air and killing everyone that was around, as everyone was terrified of Homelander since the very moment he was born. He tells him that the reason he doesn't leave was because
Couldn't stand the idea that we would be disappointed in you.
Now, Barbara isn't fearful in this moment as she tells him he will never overcome his human side of seeking approval of being loved. But he tells her he's not human, he will raise Ryan to know that as well, as he wants to share with her why he called it the bad room. As we end the episode with Sage getting the food that Deep invited her to get earlier, and he's just as confused as to what's going on with her on and off switch as she explains the mysterious instrument from last week's episode. As she explains to Deep,
their brains grow till they're about 25, then stop forever. Mine doesn't. It regenerates constantly.
And now she wants Deep to perform this frontal lobotomy so that they can spend time together without being herself, and convinces him to do so after saying they're going to watch the sex tape of Kim and Ray J. Now, I'll be honest with you all, I have a personal ick about things going in people's eyes, so this scene just completely grossed me out. But the Deep and her hooking up, I got a question for you all. Is this a real thing from her perspective, or could the Deep be using her? That's something that I never really thought about. But when it comes to this relationship, do you genuinely think that she's into him, or is this a part of her plan? Either way, these scenes between these two characters are absolutely hilarious, and if I'm being honest, they have more chemistry and better chemistry than Hughie and Starlight have ever had in this show. Now, we see Newman is creating her narrative and distancing herself from Singer, who's working with Starlight after what happened in this episode. Now, speaking of Starlight, we see Singer calls her and breaks off the partnership that was developed earlier in this episode. I know since the beginning, the show has always positioned Annie as like the one true hero of the show, and we're finally getting some of her backstory as far as her secrets that she's kept all these years, but it's just not entirely working for me, if I'm being honest. Now, I could be wrong. I hope that the storyline really has a good payoff, and I wouldn't be surprised if Queen Maeve comes into the mix to get her back on track. Now, Hughie meets with A-Train to deliver the V to give to his dad, and we see Hughie actually takes this and he shakes A-Train's hand and forgives him, but he finds out that Butcher was there the whole time. Now, we know that this is a non-lethal version of the V, as Hughie offers this to Butcher before giving it to his dad. But we actually find out that Butcher took some V a couple months ago and it didn't work. Now, again, Butcher believes that the V didn't work, but I don't think he's lying in this moment. I don't think he actually knows that it probably is working, and what it's doing is he now has some type of power, as we saw with Ezekiel earlier, and his body's now just reacting to it. Now, Hughie ultimately decides against giving his dad the V, as he's coming to accept that his father's going to pass. Now, Hughie gets a cup of coffee to get for him and his mom as he's preparing to say his goodbyes, but as we see on the monitor, it's starting to go off, and we see that this V is getting injected into his veins, and his vitals come back, and we see that his father's eyes are now open. Now, I could be reading the scene wrong, but I think it's pretty clear that Hughie wasn't the one that gave his dad the V. It was actually his mom, which the bigger question is, where does she get the V, and will his dad now have superpowers? As our last scene shows Homelander covered in blood, as we see he left Barbara in the bad room with all the remains of the staff. As it appears to me that any last bits of humanity that Homelander had was left in that bad room, and he's now a new and more powerful and diabolical version of himself. Overall, the past haunting characters like Kimiko, Frenchie, Starlight, and Homelander come to head in this episode, and honestly, the only one that had my full attention was Homelander. I'm sorry those other plots aren't as interesting, nor has there been enough care in spending time with characters again like Colin or this mysterious woman for me to care enough. But putting that aside, I do like the particular angle that we saw with Hughie in this episode, with him fighting for his life and risking his morals to save his dad, as we know that is a plot that's been going on since the very beginning of the show with him and his morals. So surprisingly, that was a standout for me in this episode. But I don't think many people are going to disagree with me when it comes to Homelander and all the stuff that he did in this episode, which to me was beyond superior to anything else going on. From Frank burning alive, to Marty laser scene, to the last shot of him with all those body parts of him covered in blood, was just truly disturbing. Now, to go back to my Gen V theory, will he call Kate in to mind control Ryan and make him follow orders and show the world the new version of himself? That's going going to be the end of this video. Let me know what you all think in the comments below as it pertains to what's to come next with Butcher. Does he have these unknown unlocked powers? What will Annie do next? What will her next moves be to regain her image? Will Frenchie give Colin his old boss over to the police to make amends? And what will happen with Huey's dad? He now has both of his parents in his life, and you can't forget about this new maybe partnership between Deep, Sage, and Ashley and A-Train. Really appreciate you all watching this week's breakdown. Make sure to check out my playlist of all of my boys coverage, including first time watching reactions. You all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll see you all on the next video.
Yeah.